What's going on, guys? Warren here. Just wanted to make a quick video on one of the most commonly asked questions out there in RC group or on Facebook, and that is in regards to how far away do I measure the beginning of the exhaust cone of my turbine to the beginning of the thrust tube, and what is the best method to get this done to get the turbine as perfectly straight and centered in the thrust tube as possible. So I'm going to share with you guys my method that I have been using for the past several years, and the amount of builds that I have done, not just for myself but for other people that I have built their jets for. I will share you guys my method, which I find is the easiest and most accurate way to measure out your distance from the exhaust cone to the thrust tube, and the easiest way to actually get that turbine perfectly lined up into the thrust tube each and every time. So all we're going to need for this process is an adjustable square, a marker, some painter's tape, and then our turbine, and then I have here a spare thrust tube that I'm going to use for the demonstration purposes. Right now I'm currently building the 2.2 meter Pilot RC matrix, so I am going to use the KingTech K120 Gen 4 for the demonstration of this video. Alright guys, so here we got everything that we need on the table to measure out the distance from the thrust tube to the end of the exhaust cone. So all you need to do is take a piece of painter's tape and basically tape it over to where the edge of that thrust tube is. So it doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of get it in there, and then I'll show you guys in a minute what the purpose of this tape is on the exhaust cone of the turbine. Alright, so we're going to set this turbine to the side. Now for demonstration purposes, this is a spare thrust tube that I have in my workshop. So what we're going to try to accomplish here is measuring out the distance from the beginning of the bell mount to where the beginning of the thrust tube is. So it's going to be a little tricky, but I'm going to do my best to try to get this all on video. So basically I'm just going to loosen up, and it's a little tight, but alright. So loosen up the adjustable square so I can slide it back and forth. I'm going to put it up against the thrust tube right at the beginning of the bell mount, and I'm just going to line up where it begins into the thrust tube. I'm not sure if you guys can see that on the video. A little tricky, but from my angle here, I'm looking at distance to the thrust tube is about 2 1/4 inches. Alright, so now that I know the distance from the beginning of the bell mount to the beginning of the thrust tube is about 2 1/4 inches. Now ideally the distance you want from the exhaust cone to the beginning of the thrust tube is anywhere between 20 to 30 millimeters. 25 is kind of like the ballpark that everyone uses, so that's roughly an inch of distance. So all I'm going to do now is, I know that my distance, or the total length of my thrust tube, is 2 1/4 inches. Then now I'm just going to subtract an inch out of that measurement, lock it in place, and then I'm going to put it up against the exhaust cone. So this is where your marker is going to come in handy. I'm just going to turn this way, and then we're just going to mark where that distance meets. Now you can do this all the way around if you want to. I usually do, and it's just to kind of make it easy for me, and then you'll see here in a minute why I do that. Alright, so we got the turbine pretty much marked up on the exhaust cone end. So notice how I have the marking on the top, and I kind of pretty much went all the way around as I can, so that way you can see from the top dead center and then from both sides of the turbine. So for demonstration purposes, this is how I normally install my turbines and mark up the exhaust cone. So once I have this jet, or basically this thrust tube installed in the jet, and I have the turbine on the turbine mount. Now all I need to do is just slide the turbine in and basically look from the very top, and just to make sure to see if I'm lined up with the beginning of the bell mount. And then from each side I can be able to tell if I am not centered, because if I am off center just by a little bit, you'll see that the lines won't line up from this side and then also on that end. So then I can make the correction to get it down to perfectly straight down the exhaust or the thrust tube, and basically have this thing set up a lot quicker than trying to stick a stick from the exhaust end and then doing measurements that way that I've seen people do. It's just a lot more complicating doing it that way than to just mark your exhaust cone and measure how big how deep your exhaust cone is, and just kind of line it up with the beginning or the face of the bell mount. So that's my method of how I install my turbines on all of my builds. I hope this method helps you guys out in your future build, and I will see you guys on the next video.